Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and when our schedules align and we are able to get together, which is usually once a week, maybe once every couple weeks, I like to get together with some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos in the world to talk about something we love very deeply. That, of course, being movies. We love it so much. It's in our title. How about that? We've got a big show coming up for you this week. We are talking Crazy Rich Asians, a huge smash hit at the box office. We'll give you our thoughts, whether we think it's worth checking out in theaters, waiting for rental, or skipping entirely. We're also going to be serving up some movie news and plugs you won't want to miss. But before we get to any of that goodness, we got to get to some even better goodness, that being my two co-hosts. Let me introduce them to you. Jim Pugliafico is here with us. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks, Brad, and welcome to the podcast, everyone.
And Will Lindis is here, too. Welcome, Will.
Hey, Brad. Hey, Jim. Hey, listeners. As always, so excited to be here talking movies with all y'all.
We got a lot to discuss tonight. So, guys, how do we feel about just jumping right in with some movie news?
No foreplay, no pillow talk first. I'm easy. Let's do it.
Let's get down to it.
All right, let's go ahead and jump on in then with some movie news. So, for anyone who may be new to the show, this is the part of our podcast where we talk about things that have snagged our interest in recent events from the film world. And I'll kick things off. It's interesting. We saw The Mummy a while back, starring Tom Cruise, and it was abysmal. I mean, it was bad. Like,
I'd almost forgotten that movie.
Right? Way to go, Brad, bringing it back up. This was supposedly the start of this whole like Universal Dark Universe franchise of films, and The Mummy pretty much sent it to the grave right out of the gate. But Jason Blum, behind Blumhouse Studios, recently on Twitter indicated that he's got some interest in reviving the Dark Universe franchise. Of course, that's all Twitter talk, not pillow talk, Will, sorry. But it did raise a question for me. Having put this franchise to rest in my mind, now all of a sudden, Jason Blum is expressing, some potential interest. What would you guys think about a Blumhouse / Universal Dark Universe franchise? Would that reinvigorate this for you at all? Is it too little, too late? What do you guys think?
It's an interesting idea. As we know, Jason Blum has made his name in taking mostly small budget horror movies and bringing those to the screen. Horror slasher kind of genre movies. That's mostly what he's known for. So we have the kind of this Dark Universe with The Mummy and some of those movies that have been have tried to be kind of big budget types of adventure movies. Didn't we have Tom? You said Tom Cruise, right? Was in The Mummy.
Yeah, that's right. And Russell Crowe.
That's a big budget. Maybe scaling it down a little bit and bringing it might be worth a try. I mean, to me, it sounds kind of an interesting combination. I'd be interested to see what they could do with it. Kind of retool the whole thing and make it, a little bit more, stripped down to its basics and see what can come out of that. I'd be down to watch something like that.
Like less of a action movie and like more of a slow burn horror movie, Jim? Is that what you mean?
They tried to make it, they did try to pack it with action. And at least that's what I remember of The Mummy. But it just had kind of that whole like polish to it of kind of a big budget movie. I'd like to see something a little more, like I said, stripped down and basic and, kind of bring out the horror elements, but it doesn't need to be a crazy, like big set piece driven, blockbuster type movie. It doesn't have to have that feel.
Yeah, Jason Blum's one of those guys who, as a producer, he's put out a lot of hits, he's put out a lot of misses, but he has 134 production credits to his name. You can't bat 1,000 with that many films. I mean, Blumhouse just churns them out. The problem with Dark Universe was, well, The Mummy, but the Dark Universe kickoff, is that when they were trying to launch that series, they looked at the success of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe franchise and tried to emulate that with these big spectacle blockbuster style films. And that's not where these horror films really work best. In fact, when I think about The Mummy, I don't think of that at all as a horror film. That was an action blockbuster that happened to have like some like minor horror trappings on the edges. So I think what Jason Blum and Blumhouse are able to do is they're able to distill something down to its roots and find out why it works, why it's terrifying, and expand upon that. And he's not unfamiliar with like franchises either, even interlinked ones. You know, he's the dude that worked with M. Night Shyamalan to bring us Split and later on Glass, which are all part of that cinematic universe that's building. And it's a very organic growth, that one, and it's so far going along pretty well. He's also responsible for the reboot of Halloween, which is coming out here in just a couple of months. So I would trust Jason Blum with this. Not to say that it would be 100% a home run. I mean, Blumhouse also does the Purge movies, and we know where I stand on those. But I think that if anyone was to take this film franchise and still keep the thing, you know, keep it a cinematic universe, a dark universe, and interrelated things, but pull it back to its horror roots, I do think Jason Blum's probably the right guy to kind of to be the architect of that.
What do you think, Brad?
I mean, I'm potentially excited by the idea. I think stripping these back down and kind of making them like atmospheric, like horror films that are interlinked, I think is potentially an awesome way to tackle it. I think it is a bit of an uphill battle, though, to take some of these classic, you know, movie monsters like The Mummy or Dracula or The Bride of Frankenstein and make them into something that's maybe like, I don't know, supernaturally scary in the modern age, but I damn well like to see him try. Yeah. But who knows if anything will happen with this? It's just Twitter talk. So, you know, nothing may ever come of it. But I do maybe kind of hope somebody at Universal is like, huh, that could be an interesting idea. Maybe we'll try another take with this, but we will see.
Yeah, all it's going to take is a kind of a strong, maybe a young, you know, writer-director's voice, filmmaker, up and coming filmmaker, brings Jason Blum this great treatment of, you know, Dracula or, you know, something along those lines, and you know, can make it work. That's another exciting aspect to this, is that, you know, we could see some exciting young talent come out of this as far as writing and directing. So yeah, I'd like to see, you know, that's something to keep an eye on.
You know, my dream cast for directing The Mummy or one of these would be is Fede Alvarez. So this is a guy that's worked with Blumhouse before, and he's got a few things under his belt, but most notably he did Don't Breathe from 2016 and the Evil Dead remake from 2013. And that's actually what made me kind of key in on him, because he basically did a remake of the Evil Dead movie, but was able to do something new and modern and sort of like or at least at the time, 2013, terrifying. And so I think that someone like that, with the right script and the right budget, not too much, but not too little, could really take a Mummy or a Bride of Frankenstein, something like that, and do something that turns it on its head while also still kind of adhering to what keeps it core. So yeah, Fede Alvarez is my dream, my dream direction there.
There you go. Well, we will have to see what happens. Hey, before we move on to our next bit of movie news, just wanted to give a shout out to some of the folks who are in the live chat with us. Jordan Riley says, first to comment again. Congratulations, Jordan, on being the first. And Magic Mike Lovins is with us this week in the chat. Hey, Mike. Glad to have you with us. Good to see you. we got to have that guy on the show again soon. I know he's got his own podcast now, but miss talking movies with you, Mike. So if there's a movie coming up you want to chat about, let us know, and let's buddy up.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, guys, let's go ahead and move on to Will. Will, what have you got this week?
You know, it's really, really interesting that you mentioned that's just Twitter talk, Brad, because this actually my news item actually kind of comes on the heels of some Twitter talk. About a week or so ago, some early reports started to come out that Idris Elba was being circled and flirted with for the role of James Bond after what's his name, Craig Daniels. Why can't I remember his name? Daniel Craig.
Craig
Yeah. Daniels. After Daniel Craig, he has one more film left.
Jeff Daniels, older
Jeff
brother.
Daniels, yeah. So after Daniel Craig ends, after this one last film that he's done. He said he's done with Bond, and so some reports have come out that Idris Elba might be tapped to be next, and to his whatever, he did not necessarily immediately disavow those. He sort of like flirted in and around those ideas, which means that there's probably some conversation happening. But it just came out. He was having a conversation, I believe, earlier today with a show called Good Morning Britain, and they said, "Hey, are you for sure going to be the next 007 or not?" And he says, "No." So. So the Twitter scuttlebutt went going. Idris Elba was part of that as well. That's fallen through. So we're left with kind of a weird state for James Bond. We know that Daniel Craig's out as Bond after one more. We know that the director who's supposed to do the next one, Danny Boyle, he's walked from the project because of conflicts with production. So we don't know who's going to direct yet, and we don't know who the next Bond is going to be. And I'm a little disappointed because Idris Elba, we talked about who my dream director would be for a Mummy reboot. Man, Idris Elba would have been the perfect James Bond for me, but wasn't in the cards, didn't happen. I'm disappointed, but I'll carry on somehow. How do you guys feel about this news?
It's kind of disappointing. I mean, I like the Bond movies. I like the older Bond movies. The new ones are fine, but I'm not hanging on every, I guess, bit of news. It was interesting to think about Idris Elba being finally getting maybe a person of color and some diversity playing Bond. I would have liked to have seen how that was going to work. Could have brought a whole new audience, even though Idris is, I like to see him in anything he does, and it's tough when actors get into these roles like Daniel Craig. You see him as Bond. You don't really see him as much of in anything else, and a chance to kind of shine in anything else. So it's kind of a double-edged sword when they name these actors, because they're going to get kind of pigeonholed into that character. So yeah, I don't know. There's some other interesting names, that are kind of in the mix as this thing, will eventually come together. I just don't know how. Will, you've probably seen some of the other names mentioned. Fassbender was mentioned in there, as possibly Bond. Tom Hiddleston, I saw actually mentioned as Bond, who that could be a pretty interesting Bond choice. So I don't know about Charlie Hunnam or Luke Evans, but Luke Evans, I guess, could be. If you think of these guys kind of in that role as Bond, that iconic role, they seem to fit, at least what's come before. I was kind of looking for Idris Elba to kind of break the mold a little bit. I don't know if we're going to get that.
If Tom Hiddleston were to be Bond, would that mean he's a bloke-y?
That's
Blokey.
exact. That's
He's
exactly
blokey, right?
That's what they actually have on they printed the posters already.
Yeah.
Oh, very disappointing. I was so excited about the possibility of Idris Elba stepping into that role. Definitely bummed out that, that's not the case. Who knows what the actual extent of the conversations were or are. But yeah, it's a bummer, man. What is Daniel Craig gonna do after these movies? Like, he was in Logan Lucky. I guess
that's true.
That was that was one role he's had outside of these
small
films.
Role there. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, what is he going to step into next? I imagine getting up in age as he is, he probably doesn't want to be like jumping off trains for the rest of his life. But I don't know what else he's going to do.
And I wonder if that's part of it too. Like, if it's one of those things where if you stay with a franchise for too long, you feel like it'll be harder for you to get roles that are not part of that franchise. So get out while you're still a young, recognizable, air quotes, young, recognizable enough face to do other work while you still can. Just looking at his production credits coming up, he's got Bond 25 and he's got a couple episodes of like a television show, but he doesn't have anything else like in the can that I'm aware of. So
that's because they're not announcing him as the ghost of Senator Palpatine in the next Star Wars trilogy. But
they've actually cast him as the next Green Lantern.
Yeah.
Oh boy. All right. Well, Jim, how about you? What do you have this week?
Let's see. So we're going to be reviewing a movie coming up here in a little bit called Crazy Rich Asians, and there's been some news about that movie. It's kind of been I guess I would call it a surprise hit, kind of a success story of summer so far, where we have this rom-com, Crazy Rich Asians. It's doing so well at the box office. It's into the area of like $40 million or something after 1 week. So it's been the success of this movie has kind of taken a lot of people by surprise. So now, of course, the movie studio Warner Brothers that put this out is announcing that, hey, guess what? We have the rights to all 3 of the Kevin Kwan books in this trilogy series, starting with Crazy Rich Asians, then China Rich Girlfriend, and then Rich People Problems, which they intend on developing into probably at least a movie trilogy, especially based on the success of this first movie. So I've heard they're going to bring, they've got the cast signed in, Constance Wu, Henry Golding, the two leads. We've got the director. I think it's is it John Chu? Is that his name? Yeah, John Chu, the director, coming back to direct the second movie as well. So yeah, we've got everybody on board for the next movie. Don't know. I haven't read the book series, and we'll probably talk about that more when we talk about the movie Crazy Rich Asians. But I don't know much about the movie, but they've I guess word on the street is that they're on the verge of officially greenlighting it, but I don't think there's any doubt that they're going to greenlight this movie since they already have the rights and the success. All the signs are indicating that that's going to happen. So, another movie coming out, and I don't want to tip my hat a little bit. It's hard to do that in this news thing, but maybe another a sequel to this movie coming out. What do you guys think?
It makes perfect sense. This is just based off of box offices. This type of movie is never going to be like Mission Impossible or Avengers or any of those movies, because it doesn't have to be. It's much smaller budget, so a smaller box office windfall can be very successful. In fact, right now this film is the most successful comedy of the year and the most successful rom-com since Trainwreck back in 2015. So, this movie is doing quite well for itself. And a lot of the both commercial and critical buzz that it's beginning, it makes perfect sense for them to move forward with another one. Last I'd heard, Jim, it's like same boat. Like, they haven't officially greenlit it yet. And I think that's usually because it's so early. Technically anything could happen. But this one's going to have legs. I do know that they've started moving forward with some of the pre-production kind of ahead of the green lighting, just sort of like which is basically a sign that says we're going to see these movies. And we'll talk very shortly about whether or not that's a good thing for us.
If it's a good idea or not.
But from a box office success standpoint, this makes perfect sense.
All I know is if it means I get more of Michelle Yeoh looking beautiful and gracious and being a total bitch, I'm on board.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't get enough of Michelle Yeoh. I mean, we've seen her in a lot in the new Star Trek Discovery series.
Yes.
Finished, and I know it's not. It's a little bit, not inaccessible, but you have to have the CBS All Access app to get it. But that's definitely a show worth watching, and she's amazing in it. So more Michelle Yeoh. I'm on board.
Indeed. Well, I think that wraps us up for movie news this week. What a perfect dovetail / segue, Jim, into our movie this week. Couldn't ask for a better setup. So we are going to be discussing Crazy Rich Asians. Here's the thing. If you haven't seen the show before, you may not be familiar with our format. If you have seen it, it's a review. That's okay. We're going to be talking about the film spoiler-free for probably about 10 or 15 minutes. We'll give you our thoughts on whether we think you should see it in theaters, wait for rental, skip it, and then we'll give you plenty of warning before we open up the floor to all kinds of spoilers. So if you're on the fence about Crazy Rich Asians and you value our opinion, feel free to hang out with us. Stick around after the trailer, which Jim will lovingly insert for us, and be part of that conversation. Folks, don't forget, I see a bunch of you hanging out with us. A few folks are active in the chat, including our friend Sam from Denver. Hey, Sam from Denver. Great to see you as always. Be sure to say hi and share your thoughts on Crazy Rich Asians in that live chat. Guys, here we go. Our discussion of Crazy Rich Asians. Jim, you're laughing. I need to know why. Tell me.
Totally unrelated to. I was just in watching my thing here. I have a Crazy Rich Asians IMDb page pulled up here, and there's an ad off to the side for that new movie AXL, and I just can't stop laughing how goofy that fucking dog looks in that movie. And I'm just thinking about how this is the dog days of summer because we have that movie Alpha, and now we have that movie AXL coming out. So,
and we just had a movie literally called Dog Days that came out.
Oh, we did?
There you go.
I missed that.
It was a movie about dogs on the hottest day of the summer.
Well, that's right.
Maybe we could review those films and A Dog's Purpose and make it like a quadruple movie review.
Hey, so it sounds like 4 dogs. That sounds like the right number of dogs to me.
I figured it might. Well, all right. Well, let's go ahead and kick this off. Will, do us a favor, if you don't mind. Give us the basic setup of Crazy Rich Asians, of course, spoiler free, and your thoughts on whether this is worth checking out or skipping.
Yeah, so Crazy Rich Asians, it's a romantic comedy based on the best-selling book series that we mentioned in the news section. It follows this New Yorker. Her name is Rachel Chu, and she's played by Constance Wu. And she and her boyfriend are going to go on a trip to Singapore because that's where the boyfriend's family is, and he's going there to attend the wedding of one of his friends. So she's nervous because she's about to meet her boyfriend, played by Henry Golding, about to meet his family for the first time. But what she doesn't realize is that they are crazy rich, like not just a little rich, crazy rich. I think what's great about this movie, there's a few things that's great about this movie. So yeah, bearing the lead. This is a great movie. What's so great about it is you see a lot of these rom-com type movies that follow very specific formulas. They always start with the kind of the will they, won't they, and then the coming together after the meet cute, and then the liar reveal trope that ends in like a climax where they come together at the end. You can almost like put that formula on top of every rom-com ever. And this movie didn't really fall into that trap. It certainly fits within the genre, and there are some very familiar elements of the rom-com genre, but it does things a little bit differently. In fact, in a lot of places, a little classier. Like it feels like it never goes cheap in terms of its dramatic, the kind of the dramatic. I guess there's a pun there, huh? But it never goes cheap when it tries to go with its like dramatic turns. They always feel kind of based on the characters' relations. I don't feel like sometimes these couple romantic comedies feel a little weird because like you kind of hate one member of the relationship because to ramp up the drama, that person has to be shitty in some way, shape, or form to the other person in the relationship. Think about Overboard, which we saw like earlier this year. Those weren't likable people. These are very, very likable characters who you root for through this very grounded and also very unrealistic drama that they go through. I love the acting. I love the performances. I love the set pieces. There's a few set pieces in this that are absolutely stunning. Like the whoever does like the production design, the costuming, and the set work for one scene in particular sort of owes the rest of the country like an apology for the amount of tissues they had to like kind of like fish out of their pockets to wipe away the tears at just how stunningly beautiful the shot was. I really like this movie, and on top of all of these things, this is the first Western movie since the Joy Luck Club to feature an all Asian cast, and so it's nice to see representation like being such a strong part of this year. I think we kind of need it specifically in this year. And I love that we're getting that, but we're also getting it with a quality film. It reminds me of what I love so much about Love, Simon, like being able to see sort of that type of like young adult comedy, but with a gay twist on it being put out to the mainstream. Like, I feel very excited that we're living in this time and we're getting to see some of these stories told from a slightly different angle. So yeah, this is a really solid movie. If you haven't seen it yet, fix yourself and go see it immediately.
Yeah. All right. High praise from Will. Jim, how about for you?
Yeah, I really, really like this movie quite a bit. Way more than I was expecting to. The trailer really, I think, undersells, or maybe it's just hard for a 2.5 minute trailer to kind of bring across the quality that this movie brings to the screen. This isn't like a slapdash romantic comedy. This is it feels to me like a labor of love for the writers and the director that are involved in this thing, and it comes through on the screen. I had a few little issues with the movie, and they're nits, and we'll talk about those maybe later. But I really love this movie a lot. Here's a couple of things that I really loved about it. I felt like it was the way it presented Chinese, Asian American culture and food and just kind of a way of life. Now, granted, this is about crazy rich Asians, so you're not going to see a cross section of any Asian culture here. These are and some people have criticized the movie for that, but it's right in the title. I mean, it's crazy rich Asians. So that's kind of what we get. But I loved, the seeing there's a few scenes, with food. We'll talk about, some of them in spoilers, maybe a little bit, but yeah, I liked it. I think this is a movie for people who say, it's a rom-com. I don't like rom-coms. I'm not going to go see a stupid rom-com. Bring me another fucking Marvel superhero movie, but I'm not going to go see a rom-com. I say see this movie. I think it's worth seeing. We'll talk about the nits later, but yeah, I loved it.
All right. So two big recommends here from Jim and Will, it sounds like. Jim, it's interesting that you mentioned the people who are like, I'm not going to go see a rom-com. For me, I'm not a fan of comedies in general. I know I'm a stone, cold-hearted guy. Apparently, most comedies don't do much for me. So going into this film, I'm just like, fuck, do I really have to see a rom-com? Not because I wanted another fucking Marvel superhero movie. Like, despite the Infinity Gauntlet over my shoulder, I'm a little marveled out. I got to be honest with you, but more so just because I don't know. I feel like rom-coms are just so vapid and shallow and worthless when it comes to my movie watching time sometimes. So when we went to see this movie, Jim's like, I'm excited to see this. I think this could be fun. I'm interested to see where this goes. I'm just like, good Lord, please, can this just be over already? And like, we can go home and continue our rewatch of Game of Thrones. And coming out of the movie, I'm like, Jim, this is one of my favorite movies of the year. And I was surprised to hear myself say that. Yeah, it's a rom-com. Yes, it has elements of every fucking rom-com out there, but just something about, I think, the chemistry of the cast here. Also some clever, subversive choices in terms of expectations and some of the comedic moments. You think it's going to zig, then it zigs and zags again in super, super smart ways. Really just tickled me to death. And I got to tell you, I know I mentioned Michelle Yeoh earlier. She was amazing on Star Trek Discovery. I think she's been amazing in everything I've seen her in. But man, oh man, this made me want a TV series or something where she is like the lead in every single episode. Like, I want as much Michelle Yeoh as I can possibly get at this point. In fact, I'm compiling a list of every movie she's been in that I haven't seen, and I want to have like a Michelle Yeoh like marathon, from action movies to dramas, I guess even to comedies. All right, she won me over. I want to do it. So there's a lot to talk about in spoilers. So I think I'm gonna save a lot of my comments for there. But if you're like me, and you're like, good fucking God, another rom-com, really? I got to tell you, this one was just really, really excellent, even if you typically don't like rom-coms. It worked for me. Mileage varies, taste varies, but I would say if there's one rom-com to give a chance within the last few years, this one would definitely be it.
I definitely have to say, like, that's not only is that high praise, but that's especially high praise from you, Brad, because I know we talked a little bit between episodes about like what are we gonna watch next, and when this one was floated, at first you're kind of like, I don't know if I can. This is not going to be in my wheelhouse. I said, what else is playing this weekend? And so for this movie to have converted you to become one of the, as you said, like one of your favorite movies of the year, like I think that speaks to just how well it's able to, like, just the amount of quality that that every element of this film brings to the screen. So that's awesome. I'm so happy to hear that you loved it.
Yeah, and also, I mean, yes, Michelle Yeoh kills it. And by the way, I still want to see. I'm looking forward to that sequel when it comes out, because I hope that's when they reveal that her character Eleanor is really Captain Giorgio in the other universe, because it really is almost the same character. Like her demeanor is almost the same. No, I'm kidding, of course. But this movie was kind of I think this is a perfect escape movie. It's kind of like a perfect summer movie. Of all the summer movies we've had that we've pinned the hopes of being kind of like the perfect summer movie, this one, most of those fell short, and this one feels like it hits the right mark. Kind of escape your own reality and go into somebody else's, this other reality that is maybe a world that you're not familiar with, and enjoy it for what it is. It's just really great. I mean, this movie, and I want to say also that Mike Lovins also says that it's more of a romantic dramedy, which is true, because there's some drama in this movie that drives the plot of the movie, that it doesn't feel forced. It feels totally natural, like the kind of drama that, it's not the kind of drama that comes out of somebody falling off a boat and getting amnesia and, trying to figure out who they are. This is the kind of drama that comes up in families like all over the world. It's interesting to see how these families deal with it in this movie. So there's the way the movie ends, and we'll talk about that in spoilers, I thought was, it was weird, because as it was happening, I'm like, don't go there. And it did. And I still cried at the end.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think, you know, that's enough, I guess, for non-spoilers. Let's get into spoilers.
All right. Well, we are going to go ahead and take the lid off the can of spoilers and let them loose into the world. If you've not yet seen Crazy Rich Asians and, you know, you value your innocence when it comes to the plot of that film, this is your chance. If you're listening live, go ahead and step away for about 25 minutes. If you're listening through the magic of digital tape delay on iTunes, Spotify, or even on our website a few days from now, relatively speaking, when we get the show loaded up, feel free to refer to the handy dandy time index in the show notes. Skip ahead as appropriate. We've got some cool stuff coming in plugs you won't want to miss. I am done awkwardly rambling to give you time to step away or fast forward. Spoilers are officially fair game. Where do you guys want to start?
Go ahead,
Jim. No, take it.
I think we should start with what I consider like the dramatic centerpiece of this movie, and that is the mahjong showdown between Rachel and Eleanor. That was kind of, I can't say it was totally unexpected because it was set up in the very first scene of the movie,
right?
And then mirrored again later. Now, I don't really know much about mahjong other than it's played with tiles with symbols on them, but I actually thought it was kind of a matchy game, but I don't know. So apparently I didn't understand the ending, that scene or the result of that mahjong match any more than I understood the playing of the
Sabak in Solo.
The Sabak in Solo. I didn't understand the rules of what was going on, but I thought I understood this scene better just because I thought the character interactions made that scene, not the actual game, right? It was about the characters, what they were saying to each other and kind of the feelings they brought, you know, kind of the whole movie kind of funneled down to that point. And I found out by listening to a different podcast today that Rachel's character actually lost the mahjong match, but I think she kind of threw the match to Eleanor, which I found out later. I didn't know. You really didn't know in the scene that well what happened.
There's a clue, and I wondered about it because she holds up a tile and she kind of looks at it and she looks at her and she looks at it and then she plays it. And Eleanor picks it up right away. And I was like, what's that about? But then when I thought she won, I was like, oh, playing that tile must have been a trap to enable her to win.
Yeah.
I guess that makes more sense.
Well, it fits more thematically this way too, because Rachel's looking at this tile, and from the way that she's looking at it, you know that she knows that Eleanor needs it. It's not in her tile set. She's obviously like we've set up at the beginning of the game or at the beginning of the movie that she's a game theory expert. You know, she knows how these things work. So that whole scene was all about her conceding. You know, like like she was conceding, like she was conceding Nick. You know, like she basically knew that she didn't have a winning hand at all sitting down at the table or with Nick, because if, as she says in that scene, either he stays with you and he's miserable because he turned me down, or he comes with me and he's miserable because you've cut him out of the family. So I'm folding, I'm walking away so that, you know, I'm losing so that you and Nick and everyone can win. And that's the best outcome. So I like that there was like that kind of that parity between the game and kind of how she's playing, and she's seeing this whole thing as this kind of game showdown with Eleanor. It added some real drama and some tension to a dramatic, intense moment.
Right. Yeah, and she, you know, it also shows that, you know, because Eleanor was kind of looking down on her the whole movie, right? She's not worthy. It was Rachel's chance to show her worthiness, her strengths, and what she can do. And and to show Eleanor in this very dramatic way and very well written way, I thought, well shown way on the screen, that she, you know, she has her strengths and she's got her head in the right place. And I just thought that was brilliantly written in that scene. So I mean, the last like 2 or 3 scenes in the movie I thought were great. I mean, there was that scene. Then we get to we can talk about the happy ending too. The scene on the airplane, right? Did you guys enjoy it? That was where I cried, right? Because I'm like, they're getting on the plane. Oh, here he comes. She's going back to America. He's getting on the plane. You could kind of see the goofy, the schmaltzy kind of rom-com ending. They're going to hug. Everything's going to be good. But what does he do? Like, he pulls out this ring that is his mother's ring. And without any words said, like, that scene told so much, about that family and about Eleanor especially. And she wasn't even in the scene, right? And you're finding out so much about that. And I thought that was great. That scene's the scene that made me cry, because the whole time I'm like, oh, please don't go there. Please don't. This movie's been awesome. Let her go back to America and have a realistic ending to this movie. But no, they did it, but then the way they did it still got me. So kudos to the movie. Did you guys like that last scene with the ring? How'd you feel about that?
Yeah, they delayed the what probably in other movies would have happened at the mahjong table happened a scene later as she's going home. And so I think just them drawing that out a little bit allows you to, like you mentioned, this ring is the ring that the
heirloom
that the mother had, that Eleanor had, that she got, and it was basically a symbol of like her not being accepted by her mother. And so by her turning that over to Nick, and to Nick use that in that reveal for the airport proposal, it shows us that Eleanor respected the hell out of the way Rachel laid her tiles out on the table during the mahjong, not just the game stuff, but the, her understanding of just how things were. And I think, going a little further on that, I think that the big thing that the Eleanor character was concerned with about Rachel to begin with wasn't her wealth or background, although don't get me wrong, those are part of it too, but more just, it almost seemed like it was more about how is this person going to be able to like stand up to the pressures of this. I don't think she's going to be able to. And so it was more like, it was like testing her and not being happy with any of the responses to that test. And in that moment, Rachel sort of proved her mettle.
Right. Well,
I actually felt like this took away from the strength of the movie. Like, I know rom-coms are supposed to have happy endings. Yeah, they end up together. It's so beautiful and wonderful. But it felt like the movie had just so cleverly and so beautifully, like, bittersweetly set this up that I was like comfortable with it in my head. I was like, oh my gosh, I really wanted, Rachel to like, come out on top and everything's going to be okay and them to get together. But I'm like, realistically, that can't happen. Like, the grandma who I thought was so sweet and wonderful and then turned out to be kind of a bitch, I was like mad at her first, but then I'm like, wait a second. No, like it sucks, but like, I kind of get it. Like, they're this rich, influential, super powerful political family. Like, Rachel's got all this, stuff from her past coming out that she didn't even know about, and I'm like, yeah, no, like that makes sense. I was like, Eleanor's kind of a bitch for like looking down on Rachel for being the same kind of woman that Eleanor was. But I'm like, you know what? It makes sense. And so I kind of wanted Rachel to go back to the States, and maybe our bittersweet happy ending is her like meeting somebody else super cool in a coffee shop, seeing her like reading her favorite book or something, like give a little carrot of hope without the pat saccharine super sweet ending.
Yeah.
I mean, I still cried. Don't get me wrong. When I saw the ring, I was like, Captain Giorgio, you live, you're back. Okay. But you know, it just, I don't know. I felt like it just kind of kicked it down a little bit.
Yeah. Me. And you're right, Brad. I mean, it was, you know, it's kind of this rom-com that kind of, I think it kind of almost demanded to have kind of a happy ending, an upbeat ending. So yeah, they gave it to us. However, I think the way that it was executed was great. I think they kind of subverted those expectations of a super saccharine ending by giving us one image that said so much about several characters in just one shot, like of the ring. You're thinking about like, oh, what must have happened with these characters that weren't even on the screen. I thought it was kind of, to me, it's great writing. This is like a show, not tell. This is a perfect example of that. And in your mind, you're playing out, you know, how that must have happened, or how it could have happened. But I guess I forgive the movie for going into that area, but I also praise it for how it pulled it off.
Well, It's so funny. Like before the movie started, like in the pre-movie commercials, it was like a Geico commercial or something where like the guy, you know, the guy's on the plane sitting in the seat and like his girlfriend shows up, you know, she runs up when she gets on the plane and she's like, no, don't go. I've changed my mind. I will marry you. And they like get off the plane and they're driving through the countryside. And, you know, then it weirdly turns into a zombie thing, whatever. But like, yeah, they're on the plane at the end of the movie. And I'm like, oh, wait. No, here it comes. Here's that scene from the guy commercial. And then all of a sudden you hear Nick and he's like, Rachel, wait. And I'm like, okay, here we go. All right.
See, and I think this is part of why I liked it so much is because when you're looking at like a specific type of genre, like there are certain things that exist within that genre that you just gotta do, you know? And like, I think about like a horror, like you mentioned zombies, a horror movie and stuff like that. You know, a horror movie without a kill in it becomes kind of a rough horror movie. And I think with a rom-com that doesn't resolve sort of the emotional tension in a satisfying way, like this is a date movie, you know, like that's what this is. This is a date movie. It's a really well crafted date movie. And so you want your date movie to come out at, you know, just like walking out happy with the person that you came there with, you know, just like, I love you too. Wasn't that so sweet? Like, I think that's all part of it. And I think what I love so much about this movie is that it was able to deliver all of those things, check off all the boxes that are sort of required of the genre, while also still giving us new and other interesting things along the way. You know, you mentioned the airplane scene. I think there were some other scenes earlier in the film that really stood out to me. Like there's this wedding sequence where it's the wedding of the friends, and so they're just there as a groomsman and the girl sitting in the audience, the guest, and of course they do the thing where they share the look, and you know the wedding's not as much about the people getting married as it is about Rachel and Nick. That thing,
seeing their future,
and so that's the thing we've seen a million times, but we see that in the middle of this gorgeously shot, beautiful sequence with lights and these butterfly sticks and this water coming down the aisle.
Thankfully, nobody drowned.
Thankfully, no one drowned. And so you get this like I think that if we didn't have those things, I think that moment would have felt a little cheap right afterwards. But because we've seen it so many times, but we had this beautiful set dressing and this opulence, which speaks so much about like why this film is wish fulfillment. Like, you know, I wish I could have this wedding. I wish I could live in this house. I wish you know, all of those things that people go to the movies for. I think that's a great way of like, they did a scene that you see in every damn rom-com ever, but they did it in such a way, they executed it so perfectly that you almost forget that you've seen this 1,000 times. And that's the same praise that I had for Love, Simon when we talked about that earlier in the year. Like there wasn't a lot necessarily new to that film, except for one, the representation, and two, even when they were doing kind of some of the tropey things, they were doing it in a way that was just interesting or just different enough to kind of let you mentally forgive it because you're on board, you're invested with the characters.
Yeah. I really love that wedding scene. You could almost hear like in the audience you could almost hear a gasp from the audience when they at some of those shots when they have that low shot and the water starts coming out. People for a second are like, "Oh my god, what is this? Like, is it Megalodon? What's going on here?" Like,
my god, it's Megalodon.
And
by the way, there will be none of those in the audio this week for anyone that
no,
that listened
I won't
through
put
last
those
week.
We got enough of those last week. But just you know, as that happened, and it's like, oh my god, this is beautiful, and like wedding planners everywhere were feeling a little embarrassed by that scene, I think, because they're like, oh my god, I don't know if I've done anything this great. But yeah, I thought that scene was awesome. I'm trying to think of the scene that I know what I want to talk about. A couple of nits I had. We talked about how this movie and its representation, and man, I don't know. I did not care for the sole gay character in this movie. You know, comic relief. But the one gay character in this movie is definitely played for laughs, largely for laughs. And I don't know how I felt about that. I guess on one hand, I'm like, okay, more and more these days you know, gay characters in movies are not that strange anymore. But the way this movie played it was kind of like old school gay representation. We'll take the most flamboyant character we have, and you know, that'll be your gay representation. I'm still not sure how that character sat with me.
Here's my thing, and I can't believe I'm defending this, but I am. You have this whole movie about all these different couples, right? And like, if you want, I guess, real true to life, like gay representation, like I guess you could just have another gay couple being a gay couple, doing gay couple things amongst all these straight couples. And yeah, they're two men, but like, or two women, but like they would just kind of blend in a little bit. I think in the context of this film, sort of a la My Best Friend's Wedding, you almost need like this sassy gay friend to like be stereotypical and like do these things. And it does set that gay person apart. I was actually afraid the opposite. I was afraid we weren't going to have a gay person at all.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was pretty okay with it too, because I think they did a good enough job of lampshading it for me, because this is a character who was sort of, he says it himself, kind of the rainbow sheep of the family. You know, we've got this family that has been, as we see throughout the rest of this movie, is really big on propriety and the way they're perceived and all of these things. And they're not like out and out shunning the character, but you can tell that like he is seen like, you know, like slightly diminished in the family's eyes. As a result of that, with him sort of being this sort of like 1 foot as an insider, but 1 foot as an outsider, I think he's able to appreciate Rachel's plight the most of all of the different characters, outside of Astrid, who I have a nit to talk about here in a second.
Oh, yeah.
But so I really liked having this character who was both inside the family structure, but also outside of it enough that he could give this advice and give this feedback. And was he camp? Yes, but I'm also okay with that, because like, while I appreciate that there are films that have gay representation that is like, you know, it's just guy next door, kind of like normalcy and stuff, I also do appreciate still that, like, you know, there is camp and there is flamboyance within our community, and it's okay for that representation to appear on screen too. And so I'm okay with like having both types of representation out there. And I think that this was respectful. Like, you know, no one was like straight up gay bashing the character. Like, you understood where he fit within the family role. Now, the Gemma character, or the Astrid character played by Gemma Chan, I have a nitpick there, and not because of the actress. I think she was stellar in this. I thought she was stellar. But she represented what I imagine was a set of really compelling stories in the book that had to be chopped for time for the movie.
Yeah, it felt like that.
Astrid has this whole other story with her husband and finding out he's cheating. And, you know, she interacts briefly with Rachel and the two bond, and that's cool. But the climax to her story is happening concurrently to the climax of Rachel and Nick's story. And it feels like you're watching clips from another movie that don't belong there. Same with some of the brothers who appear in the background very briefly. They're not given enough development, not that they need a whole lot, but they're not given enough to really stand out, aside from that's the Stern family one and that's the one that drinks a lot. And again, that's a fine enough role to show, you know, they communicated quickly where they fit within the family and all that. But I just felt like there were a lot of characters that probably had more. I haven't read the book, but my hunch is, and I'm planning on reading the book. My hunch is these characters probably had more to do in the book, and just some of that got cut for Nick, Rachel, Eleanor stuff for the film,
but not cut enough.
But not, they're in there enough to where you can tell that there's like story arcs and legs, but they're not developed. So like, it's a nitpick. Like I appreciated the hell out of this movie, but I could have done with some different pacing with the background.
I have a question. Did you guys get any like Forgetting Sarah Marshall vibes out of that scene where Astrid and Rachel are like sitting on the beach and like commiserating? Or is it just me?
No. I when I was thinking about like, my brain does this compartmentalization thing where I like compare movies to other movies, and sometimes that's unfair. You know, judge a movie for what it is. But I kept thinking of Forgetting Sarah Marshall while watching this movie. So I'm glad you mentioned that, and I probably the beach setting is a part of it. You know, but yeah, I'm actually very shocked that you said that, because that was exactly where my brain went too.
Yeah, very very much. I mean, I probably, you know, Forgetting Sarah Marshall was either a big influence on the writer or the director of the movie even. But yeah, definitely. And the other scene that I thought was weird was the dead fish. Kind of in the middle of the movie. I'm like, that's kind of a dramatic way. Like, it's kind of a sudden and dramatic way. Like, is somebody gonna is there a killer on the loose here that like wants to kill her? I mean, is that how much they didn't like her? Because I mean, that's a pretty unless there's some kind of cultural thing.
Well, I mean, I think it's a pretty big, obvious, like kind of like a fuck you moment. Like, but it's immediately followed by a scene that didn't make much sense to me, and only because of the way it was shot. We're nitpick territory. So they decide to go off and bury the fish, just sort of as kind of like, hey, you know, we're going to show them what's what. Like, this doesn't affect you. We're going to go bury the fish. We're not going to let them see this impact you. So they go and like are like 40 feet away from where all the other girls are burying the fish
with the dead fish,
and they're just like in the background. They're just acting like they don't see it. Like, I would like to have seen in that scene maybe the girls like looking over and snickering or maybe whispering or something like that. But like, there's no reason they shouldn't have been able to see what Rachel was doing and responding in some way, shape, or form.
Well, and even to flip it, like if the goal is to not let them see it affecting them, well, they just went and buried the stupid fish, and then they sit down right next to it, and they're like crying and hugging on each other. So like, even though the girls 40 feet away can't tell what they're talking about, it's still going to look like they just buried the fish and now they're crying. Like, it doesn't exactly, I think, serve the purpose that they'd hoped, you know. But I still appreciated that scene. I liked the friendship between Rachel and Astrid. And I got to be honest, I think the conflict between Astrid and her husband worked a little more for me than maybe it did for you guys. I actually wanted to see like more reaction from Rachel over the whole like rich thing. Like, you know, when you're in a relationship with someone who makes so much more money than you do, sometimes there's like this inferiority thing that can crop up, and it can do weird things to a relationship. And so, you know, I was like, oh, Rachel just found out that Nick is like super, super rich and has this crazy rich family. And so I was kind of like, oh, are we going to get some of that? And then we didn't really. She was super cool with it. So when this cropped up between Astrid and her husband, I kind of dug that conflict. Not so much the affair, but like I I thought it was cute seeing Astrid like hiding all the crap from her shopping trip, and I dug that.
Yeah, it was good. It was just it needed some more hooks into the main story, I guess, is my thing. Not that I didn't like the Astrid stuff. One other nitpick that I had, and these are so minor, I still like this movie. I feel like the initial reveal of basically going from Nick has no money to Nick has a ton of money was very quick and very weird, and I don't know that they did a good enough job of explaining why he kept it from her.
Right.
I know why he kept it from her during the course of the relationship, but he literally got her on the plane and was flying her there in first class and like going, oh no, we just have a special deal. Like, what was he going to expect was going to happen when they got to the island and were charted off to this like
palatial mansion,
like $200 million mansion with like the, like a princess was there and just all of that stuff. Like, was he planning on just sort of like kind of rom-com, like doing the whole like I'm hiding my wealth the entire movie, which I would be interested in seeing that movie too. But I just wish they'd done a little bit more of him. Like maybe his reveal could have been just a little bit more. They could have done just a little bit more during that when they're in the plane and they're talking about how wealthy he is. Like I don't think they do a good enough job of him explaining just how wealthy they are. And when she gets there, it feels like he's sort of setting a weird trap for his girlfriend there, right? Like it's kind of setting her up to fail.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you're the girl, you're like, okay, I have to be upset that who knows how long they've been together at that point, but like there's been no indication that you know about your family, and what has he lied to her and hidden things from her? Obviously, the wealth part of it. I don't know how you hide something like that. So you got to be upset about that. But then, or is she just like, oh, now this guy's rich and this is kind of amazing, so I forgive it? It's just not really mentioned. It's not really, it's not really commented on in the movie at all.
It would have been really interesting if like they'd gotten back to the United States and like maybe we had seen Nick's apartment like in the beginning of the movie. And it's like a poor person apartment, like a college student apartment, whatever. And they get back to the States and they're headed back to Nick's place. And she's like, wait a second, we're not going the right way. And he's like, oh, let me actually take you to my real place. And then boom, it's this giant house with, servants and,
Yeah, and I can even forgive a lot of my own nits with it too, because this movie is about getting Rachel in the situations where she's overwhelmed by the opulence. And so if they had spent a lot more time up front with just kind of how the reveal worked, it would have taken us too long to get to, I guess, the meaty part of the movie. So I'm kind of talking myself out of my own nitpick here. But it's one of those things where it's like, on paper, like, it's like probably an issue with the script slightly, but realistically, like it serves the goal of getting the movie where it needs to be more quickly. So
we need to get crazy and rich quick.
Yeah.
Let's work on that. Well, guys, we are getting long in the tooth. How do we feel about maybe moving on to some plugs as we draw to a close?
Let's plug it up.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, this is the part of the show where we clue you into some things that we've been enjoying that have grabbed our interest, we think might grab yours. Let's go ahead and kick things off with Jim. Jim, what's your plug for this week?
I'm going to plug a TV series we started watching. We started watching it independently, and now we're kind of watching it together and with some friends at the same time. And it's in season 1. It's coming to the conclusion of season 1. 8 episodes, about an hour long each. This one's called Sharp Objects, and it's on HBO. This one stars Amy Adams as a reporter from St. Louis who goes back to her small town where she grew up, where things aren't so happy for her back there. It's there's some family issues going on. She's got some personal issues. But there's also, she's gone back there to report on a series of murders of girls that has happened and she's there to kind of report on kind of the investigation that's happening into the murders. And then, and we're also dealing with her personal and family problems also at the same time. A very heavy dramatic content. Amy Adams is great in it. Patricia Clarkson is in this movie and is really good. Chris Messina, who has been in a few things, but I remember him from the other HBO series, 6 Feet Under. He was Claire's boyfriend in that movie. A lot of good performances here. This is kind of a atmospheric, slow burn kind of series played out over the 8 hours. I haven't got to the conclusion yet, but this town has secrets. The mystery is kind of revealed. Several mysteries are revealed throughout the run of the show. I think this one is worth watching. If you have HBO, it's called Sharp Objects. If kind of this like dark, atmospheric, like make you feel like you're in the deep South kind of TV show is up your alley, check it out. Sharp Objects.
Let me just say this. It's a phenomenal series, but if you take Jim's recommendation and check it out, this is not a like
Binge.
Watch while you're on. Well, that too. This is not a binge show because it will kill your soul. But it's also not a like watch it while you watch your phone kind of show. There's lots of cool things that the director does. He directs all of the episodes, by the way. It's all one coherent thing.
Jean-Marc Vallée.
Yep. You got it. And he does these incredible, cool things, sort of blending like the Amy Adams characters, like mental imaginings with reality, and things shift and change. And Jim, you've watched the episodes twice now because you've gone back and watched some more of it with me. And you said you keep catching things you didn't see the first time.
Yeah. This is kind of, there's so many like quick flashes of like flashbacks and just some really cool things that they do with different shots in the movie. And it actually plays tricks with your mind, which I found astounding. Like you're seeing something, you think you're seeing something on the screen, but it's something totally different. So it's got that unique angle to offer. So yeah.
Awesome plug. All right. Will, how about you? What have you got?
So this last weekend was pretty weird for me. I didn't get a chance to see anything new in the theaters because I went to go see a Winona Ryder marathon. And let me tell you, just as an aside, like if you ever get a chance to do one of these, like if you have a local theater that does one of these, like we're going to play a bunch of movies by one actor or one director type kind of mini marathon type things, do them. They're just so much fun. So I didn't get a chance to see any of the new stuff in the theaters, but I do want to draw everyone's attention to something that they can see on Amazon Prime. I figure most or a lot of people have Amazon Prime, so it's an easy way for them to see something for air quotes free. This movie is called Saturday Church, and it's actually a film that won the, I do screening for the AGLIF Festival here in Austin, and it won our narrative competition last year. We're gearing up for our next one in 2.5 weeks. It's crazy how close we are to it. Saturday Church is an absolute must-see for just about anyone. It's about this 14-year-old boy named Ulysses. He's struggling with his gender identity. He's, after his father's passed, he's been kind of sneaking in and dressing in his mother's clothing, kind of just sort of experimenting with what it's like to wear heels, that sort of thing. And also struggling with his kind of how religion ties into kind of how he sees his gender. And so his aunt comes and stays with his mother and his younger brother, and there's a lot of conflict that happens there. And he starts to use these fantasy sequences, like musical numbers that he sees in his head, to sort of escape from just this uncomfortableness that he is experiencing with that own conflict. And then he eventually finds this group of people who work at a community structure in the inner city. And there he's able to kind of find his passion. It's A wonderful little story. It's only an hour and 20 minutes, so it's a pretty brisk watch, all things considered. And I think the most notable thing about this movie is two of the major supporting characters in it. One of them is this woman named Ebony, played by MJ Rodriguez, who is the lead or one of the leads on Pose, which is the FX story or FX series by Ryan, the dude that does
the Glee
Murphy,
guy.
the Glee guy,
Ryan
Ryan Murphy, by Ryan Murphy. It also has India Moore, who is also in that series. So if you like Pose, and you should like Pose because Pose is amazing, you will absolutely love seeing Saturday Church, which is some of these actors kind of like cutting their teeth about a year before they got on Pose.
I was going to say, I started watching Pose a couple weeks ago. And when you started describing this, until you mentioned the title, I'm like, it sounds like he's describing Pose almost.
This is almost like a sort of like I don't want to say it's in the same universe as Pose because it isn't. These are very different characters, but it shares a very similar structural DNA, which you can tell is part of why Ryan Murphy tapped these two actresses specifically to move over to the Pose series. Like, so yeah, check out Saturday Church. It's on Amazon Prime. It's free. It's only going to take you an hour and 20 minutes of your time. It's a great film. And yes, absolutely, please support LGBTQ film. We don't get a ton of representation. And so when we have these films that not only represent us, but represent us so exquisitely well, I just can't champion them enough.
Excellent. I'm gonna check that one out. It seems like I can, when I'm looking for something like to fill that time, that's not going to be a major, investment of time. Then it sounds like right up my alley.
Oh yeah.
Hopefully you like it better than Pose, babe.
I know. I wasn't really on board with Pose for the first episode, so I'm going to give this one a shot.
All right. Well, for me this week, it's no surprise I have not been a huge fan of the DC live action films. Man of Steel was a big disappointment. Justice League was a huge disappointment. I don't know what's going to happen with Aquaman. I hope it's not a huge disappointment. Wonder Woman was great. Loved Wonder Woman, but I mean, 1 out of 8 films. Not a great record. But I have to say, despite my misgivings about the DC films lately, a new animated film came out in July called The Death of Superman, which is based on one of my favorite comic series ever. In fact, it was one of the first comic series I ever collected when I was a kid. Somewhere I still have every single issue that came out, including variant covers of all those comics. They're in a storage unit somewhere. I don't know if I'll ever see them again but this animated film came out, and I was a little on the fence about checking it out because a movie came out in 2007 called Superman Doomsday, which was basically the same story in some ways. They took some licenses and changed a bunch of stuff, and it was terrible. I didn't like it at all. But I had heard some good things. The Death of Superman had a good Rotten Tomatoes score, which isn't always a bar that I use to decide whether to see a movie. But I was like, you know what? Why not? Let's take a chance. Let's see how it is. It was amazing. I loved it. It's got a great cast. Jerry O'Connell is near unrecognizable as the voice of Clark Kent and Superman. I had no idea who it was. But I did, of course, pick up on Nathan Fillion as Green Lantern. He's voiced Green Lantern before. Rainn Wilson voices Lex Luthor, and he's probably my favorite Lex Luthor in recent years. I mean,
haven't you guys ever seen Shark Week?
He's fantastic in the role. That just like exuding like, condescension and confidence is really awesome. Rosario Dawson is fucking Wonder Woman in this movie, which was really, really great to hear her come up. So the voice acting is phenomenal. The animation here is incredible. They did make a few changes to the story, but you know what? I think it makes it tighter. I think it makes it work well. Now I want to go find out if the Comic Book Bears podcast like reviewed that movie at all, because like I need to know all of the opinions from them on this. But I really enjoyed it. Jim sat down and watched this with me. Jim, I don't know where on the scale you really fall, but did you like it better than Justice League?
Oh yeah, I loved it better than yes, I did. I did like it better than Justice League. Wonder Woman was great, and I'm not a fan. I gotta admit, I'm not a huge fan of some of these animated superhero movies. I mean, we kind of watched that, and then I think the day later we watched kind of the end of the Spider-Man Venom trilogy thing or whatever it is.
Well, and it's to be fair, that was a TV show from like 1996.
Yeah, oh God, yeah. Well, I'll just forget it then. I won't compare them if you don't think the comparison is fair. But I just love the writing. I think they veered away from a lot of that, like that Marvel quippiness that we see even in some of the live action movies. It's pretty straight ahead. Like you said, Brad, it's very tight. I thought the animation was great. They do some things with point of view, camera point of view, in some scenes, just some little insert shots that I think are pretty inventive. So yeah, I think it's definitely worth watching. Any superhero fan, I think, would probably enjoy this a lot.
Well, there you go. If you're interested in Superman at all, and maybe you've never read that comic series, this is definitely a worthwhile movie to check out. All right. Well, I think that pretty much wraps us up for this week. Want to give a big thank you to everyone who was hanging out with us in the live chat. Astro, Bobby, Mike, Sammy, Jordan. I mean, there were a bunch of people. It was a little hard to kind of keep up at some point, watching you guys come in and out. But as always, great having you with us. Just a quick reminder, the show is on Spotify now. If iTunes isn't your thing, or listening on our website isn't your thing, Spotify makes the show really easy to access. So a lot of folks are finding their way. We've got new listeners that are finding the show through Spotify, which is awesome. The show's almost 6 years old at this point, and it makes me happy to hear that this new medium is helping new folks to find it. So check it out. We will be back with you guys soon, I'm sure. But guys, just to tide people over until we return, where can they find you and talk to you online? Jim, go.
You can find me on Twitter at JJP Out West, all one word, JJP OUTWEST. Also find me on Facebook under my regular name, Jim Pugliafico.
All right. Will, how about you?
Yeah, please look for me on Twitter at Whatever Cove. You can find me on Facebook. I'm William Lindis. Just send me a message first so I know who you are. And also, I post regularly on every movie that I watch on letterboxd.com. If you do a search for William Lindis there, you should find me. Please follow me. I'll follow you back.
All right. And you can find me on Facebook. Just search for Brad Harris. I'm the one that probably has a bunch of Chub, Chaser, Bear, etc. friends in common with you. Go ahead and send me a message. Let me know you're from the podcast. You can also find me on Instagram at MSU Big Guy. It's been a pleasure, everybody. We'll see you all next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.